Alright, our last theorem for today involves angle bisectors. And if one angle of a triangle is bisected, and bisected means to be cut in half or into two congruent parts, then the triangle is going to divide the opposite sides of the triangle into two segments that are proportional to the other two sides. Now, what this means is first we have to look and see what bisected means. So notice you'll have these little tick marks, again, in your triangles to note that those two angles are congruent, which means angle B is the angle that's been bisected. As a result, this segment right here that cut those two angles into two congruent angles is referred to as the angle bisector. Now, not only did it split that angle into two congruent parts, it made two segments on the opposite side of the triangle. Now, those two segments are not congruent to each other, but what this theorem is saying is that this particular angle bisector has created a set of proportional parts. As a result, here's the proportion that we get. So side AB, which has not been cut by the angle bisector, corresponds to the segment AD that happens to be on the same side adjacent to segment BA. That is equal to segment BC, the other side of the triangle that has not been bisected by the angle, and its corresponding part down here, DC. And that is our proportion that is a result of an angle being split into two equal angles. Now again, like our other one, we could flip-flop this around. We could flip-flop it and have AD over AB equaling DC over BC, and it's going to get us the same result when we cross multiply. It really just depends on how you easily see it. Alright, so for our first example, our goal is to find the value of P. Again, I'm going to verify that I have something that I can write a proportion for, and these two marks here indicate that that angle here has been bisected, and as a result, these two segments that are over here will create a proportion with these two segments over here. I like to pick the sides of the triangle that have not been split by the angle bisector. So as a result, I'm going to take this 24 and I'm going to make it as my ratio with the segment of the side that has been split, P. Since I went with that option of going with the non-split side, then when I create my other ratio, I have to do that same thing. Take your value of your non-split side over the segment that was split. And there's your proportion. Again, once you have your proportion, the rest of this should hopefully be smooth sailing at this point in time. We're going to cross multiply, and it'll allow us to solve for P. In this case, we get 168, and divide by 12, and P will equal 14. So the biggest challenge really with these problems is just understanding how to create the ratios. Which number goes on top where? How do I set up the order? So again, the order is probably the easiest when you look at it as, hey, here's this side, not been split, divided by the side that's adjacent to it that has been split. Next example has a tiny little twist. So I see that I have my two angles that have been bisected, but the problem is I don't know squat about QR and about RS. But I do know that the entire segment happens to be the length of 18. And here's where the part gets tricky. I can't set up my proportion knowing the whole entire length of QS. So I'm going to have to rename QR and RS using this 18. So my goal is to find QR. That's what I'm being asked to find. So I'm going to call QRX because that's the segment I'm interested in. And as a result, I still need to now identify what is RS in relationship to whole QS. Well, since the whole thing happens to be 18, and we know this little part is X, take 18, take away the X that you don't know, and you'll have what happens to be left over. So again, look at where I got that 18 minus X from. So I defined QR as x. This, so imagine x was 10. 10 minus 18 would give us what's left over. So again, it's a little tricky, and you might have one or two of those to deal with on practice as well as homework. So you refer to your notes to help you. Now that you have all those pieces in place, now we can set up our ratios. 12 corresponds to x, as 8 corresponds to 18 over x. Sorry, 18 minus x. Once you have your proportion, now we cross multiply. We're going to be very careful when we cross multiply here, because that 12, remember, has to be distributed to 18 minus x. So we're going to apply the distributive property. That's going to get me 216, and that's a negative 12x. Our goal is to solve for x, so I'm going to get the x's to the same side. So I'm going to add 12x to both sides. And then my last step will be divide by 20, and x will equal 10.8. And since x was 10 or a QR, your answer actually is 10.8.